Howdy. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Buenos noches, buenos dias, buenos tardes. Wherever you're listening, whatever you're listening, whenever you're listening. Howdy. I hope you're doing well. My name is Miles Moscato. I'm your host of the Paradigm of Positivity podcast. And today we're going to be talking about something negative. Because how are we going to be leaders? How are we going to stay leading our communities, our families, and everything through the negative? It's by shifting the paradigm to positivity, right? So let's dive right into the negative when God doesn't come through for you. Ooh, it's a bit of a paradoxical question because, God always comes through for us. But hey, sometimes it doesn't feel like it. So we're here to talk about that, right? We're here to talk about failure, disappointment, being overlooked, sometimes in many cases being screwed over. How do we handle that? So we're gonna talk about failure today on the Paradigm of Positivity and how to fail with a positive mindset, outlook, and actually gain things from losses. Because you lose to learn and you win to reward yourself, right? So if we're just rewarding ourselves, we're never going to learn very much, and eventually we're going to lose. So let's get losing and learning here on the Paradigm of Positivity podcast. So there's a couple types of failure that exist, right? There is self-inflicted failure, there is environmental failure, and then there is redirect, right? So redirect is a redirection from God. If you're not a Christian, the universe or whatever, I don't know what you believe in, but sometimes God will redirect us, and it feels a lot like failure. So what we're going to do today is we're going to break down all three. So let's talk about the first type of failure, self-inflicted failure. Ooh. Self-inflicted failure is a hard one to accept, right? I'll tell you guys a story. So I played college lacrosse, right? I was a pretty good player, in my opinion. Not the best, not the worst, but I definitely had some skill. I was known for toughness. I could play through a lot of injuries. I could score some goals no matter what was going on. Being known for toughness was actually a controllable failure that was my own fault. It was my own doing. I suffered a lot of injuries, right? Separated shoulders, blown out knee, broken ankle, torn muscles, more concussions than I can count, which we're not going to get into that, right? Self-inflicted failure is real. We could say that I was going, balls to the wall. I would go hard, and I would put myself at risk, but I guarantee you 75% of those injuries were due to my failure to nutrition my body properly. I was drinking too much alcohol on the weekends, and to be honest with you, the weeknights, I was smoking marijuana regularly and getting away with it. I was putting my scholarship at risk, and I was eating McDonald's far more than a college athlete should be eating McDonald's. So of course, at one point, something's going to break. Thank God it was my body that broke down and it wasn't my reputation. But hey, that self-inflicted failure, that was me letting down my community, my team, my coaches on a day-to-day basis with my own actions. And my body took the brunt of that pain and took that punishment. So there's an unavoidable aspect of self-inflicted failure that every single leader, every single man, every single woman all need to get over in our own lives, right? For a lot of us, it's you're really, really intelligent, but you just aren't getting good grades. Well, you got to do your homework. You got to show up for class. Those 10% grades on homework and participation, you get none of those, you're obviously in the C range because you're not getting 100 on every test, right? That's self-inflicted failure. Self-inflicted failure also happens in the workplace. If you have a temper and you don't have your temper under control, you're going to lose your job. No matter how good you are at it, no one wants to get yelled at in the workplace. And this line of things that I'm telling you, this isn't me calling anyone out. This is me explaining to you guys all the ways in which I've failed. And I've been lucky. I've been led through a lot of these failures by incredible leaders who've given me chance after chance after chance after chance to grow and given me all the strategies to improve myself. But not everyone gets that opportunity. Not everyone's been blessed with the leaders that I have been. And to be honest, if I haven't been blessed with the leaders I have been, the failures that I've had would be public and catastrophic. So Let's get this out of the way. You've got to eliminate self-inflicted failure. We all know what the right things are and what the wrong things are. So let's focus on doing the right things first, right? So let's get this out of the way first at the beginning of the podcast. Self-inflicted failure is not okay. We're not going to self-sabotage. There's not time to self-sabotage. You know, my generation, Generation Z, the younger millennials, the older Gen Alphas, you know, we're inheriting a world that's got a lot of issues and a lot of despair. So self-inflicted failure is not an option for us because we're responsible for a lot more people than ourselves. We're responsible for our communities, for our younger siblings, for our the ability for our parents to leave a good legacy. You know, that's a lot of responsibility rolling on our shoulders. Let's not let self-inflicted failure become a habit, because I let it become a habit in my life. And I probably spent more time in college finishing my degree than I had to. I've probably advanced less professionally than I could have because I didn't want to step out and take risks when I needed to. You know, self-inflicted failure is a real killer. And with the amount of times I've self-inflicted failure on myself, I would be remiss to not mention it to you guys. There is such thing as self-inflicted failure. Sometimes when you get passed up for the promotion, you genuinely haven't made good connections with the people in your office. Yeah, you may be more competent than the guy to your left, but when you get moved up, there's a lot more person-to-person contact. So you can't be a hothead that gets stuff done when most of your job is going to be person-to-person contact. 40% results still don't make up for 60% bad face time with your coworkers or with other contractors or with other businesses if you're in business-to-business sales, right? This is a very easy concept to get. And there's tons of literature out there to work on eliminating self-inflicted failure. My favorite piece of literature, Bible, specifically Proverbs, right? The Way of Wisdom is one of my favorites. The Call of Wisdom, you know, the second half of the first chapter in Proverbs tells you, hey, you got to do the right things, know the right things, and execute on the right things. So let's dive out of self-inflicted failure, because if you're listening to the Paradigm of Positivity podcast, you don't seem like a self-inflicted failure type of person. You want to be a positive role model. You want to be a positive influence. You want to be an impact player on your team, whether that be sports, whether that be business, whether that be ministry, whether that be philanthropy. You know, I mean, hey man, even if you're a criminal, dude, at least you want to be the best criminal there is. I'm not here to judge, dude. Right? I wouldn't say it's the most sustainable career in the world, but again, the economy's in shambles, man. Like, who am I to say anything about anything? Let's move forward to environmental failure, because this is one that kind of affected the younger generations in the world, right? Environmental failure is when you are competent, you have opportunities, but your environment isn't heeding the correct opportunities for you, right? So environmental failure is a very interesting concept because there's two sides to this coin. There's the environmental failure of you need to get out of this situation and put yourself in a better situation so that you can exemplify the best things about you. And then there's environmental failure that we are responsible for. You know, it's a little different than self-inflicted failure, but it's failure due to lack of contribution. So let's dive into that. Let's dive into that deep right now. Failure due to lack of contribution, environmental failure occurs when there are not enough leaders in a situation. You know, there are a lot of situations where there are too many leaders, too many leaders and not enough Joes. Too many Jimmys, not enough Joes, right? Everyone wants to be captain, everyone wants to be in charge, everyone wants to be the boss, but at the end of the day, we need queen bees and worker bees. So environmental failure can occur from too many leaders. In that case, taking a step back is what we need to do and let something work itself out. If you really are the Lisan al-Gaib, if you are the chosen leader, then it will come right back to you, right? But the one I want to focus more on, which I think is truly affecting Generation Z, it will affect Generation Alpha, and it has affected the millennials. And I see a lot of younger millennials breaking out of it, and so I feel like it needs to be shared, is when there's too many Joes and not enough Jimmys. when there's too many followers and not enough people willing to step up to lead. This comes from a lack of self-confidence. This comes from a lack of competence in many cases because people aren't getting reps leading. And it also comes from self-sabotage, right? It's an evolved version of self-inflicted failure. So let's dive into this. I'm going to say let's dive into this about 45 times. I might put a counter at the end of the video if I'm not lazy. So environmental failure, an example of environmental failure that could have occurred but didn't occur in the Bible is the story of Gideon. The Lord Almighty came to Gideon through his angel and said, "You are my mighty warrior. You're supposed to liberate your people. Just follow me and follow my instructions." And Gideon looks back at God and he's like, "No, I'm so weak. I'm not the one. Like, I'm the weakest in my father's line, and we've been destroyed, and I'm hiding here in this wine press, threshing wheat, and afraid, scared. Maybe traumatized to an extent. Maybe had some failures in the past. Maybe had some self-inflicted failures he's been feeling shame over and guilt over. I haven't read many extra biblical texts on Gideon, so I'm not really the authority of all to say on this, but I can tell you that there's been moments in my lacrosse career, in my professional career, in my philanthropic career, where there was not enough leaders and a lot of followers, and I knew what had to be said, and I knew I had to step up and say something, and I chose not to because I was afraid to step out. I was afraid of being cringe, and things went wrong. And then when things went wrong, everyone just looked around like, well, because no one wants to be, the leader when things go wrong. No one wants to be Bill Belichick when Tom Brady throws an interception. But sometimes people have to take the heat. And a lot of times we're afraid to take any heat, so we don't step into leadership like we should. An example of this in my personal life would be, I was working with a philanthropy, and this philanthropy is very dear to my heart. And the leader of that philanthropy will literally work to death in order to serve the people that we serve, right? And I've heard people say that before. Oh, he's worked his butt off to get here. Or, oh man, that man, he really leaves it all on the field. He would give you the shirt off his back if he would. This guy, my leader, Sam Kunert of Nub Ability Athletics, I've watched him work so hard at a philanthropic event, they had to call an ambulance for him on the last day because he legitimately collapsed. That was a situation in which I failed. I was a head coach of a very big program at the camp. I was well acquainted with Sam by that point. I was, I think, 5 or 6 years into my philanthropic career. I could have stepped up. I could have taken responsibility off his plate, and I chose not to. And it led to one of my best friends, one of my mentors, one of my leaders, literally the guy who poured a water bottle over my head and read the sinner's prayer when I accepted the Lord Jesus Christ into my heart. I didn't cover his back. I wasn't my brother's keeper. And he was put in a precarious medical situation because of it. I wasn't willing to step up and be a leader and assume responsibility when my leader needed me to. And he was a good man, so he wasn't going to force me into it. You don't want to be sitting there realizing you could have done more in a moment like that in your life, right? There's some first responders that might be listening to this. There's some guys in the military that might be listening to this. There's some firefighters that might be listening to this. Even man, there's some philanthropists listening to this that don't know their leader is about to fall over. There's some deacons in the church that don't understand that their pastor is near the end of his rope, but he's going to keep going and serving because that's what leaders do, and leaders need other leaders to backfill. And so let's get into it. How does one approach environmental failure and fix it as they're in an organization? If you're not getting the opportunities for either yourself or your organization or a combination of both in the situation, and it's an environmental problem, there's not enough leaders around, how do we step up into environmental leadership, right? So one of my favorite proverbs of all time, and this isn't a biblical proverb, this is just a wisdom proverb from one of my favorite people on earth and the best coach I ever had, Nick Marks. He taught me this amazing term or proverb. It's called the pig and the chicken, right? So you fix environmental failure with environmental leadership. And environmental leaders are either pigs or chickens, right? So we're making breakfast. You got your hash browns, you got your orange juice, maybe a glass of milk, your bowl of cereal. You've got some eggs, you've got some sausage, some bacon, a little bit of hot sauce on there if you're a flavor guy like myself. A lot of people contributed to that plate of breakfast. The people at the juicing facility. The trees, they grew the oranges. The cows, they provided a bit of milk, but that's just kind of their job. They just kind of loaf around and give us milk. But there's two main components. There's two main animals that really make breakfast happen. The pig and the chicken. And so the chicken contributed, right? Chicken sacrificed something. The chicken, laid some eggs and gave up those eggs. Like, what, here, take these eggs to go make breakfast with, right? The chicken was a contributor. And, I think everyone's really focused on being contributor nowadays, right? Everyone wants to contribute. Everyone wants to be a part of it. The pig was committed. The pig gave everything. So what is environmental leadership? Environmental leadership isn't just contributing. It isn't just sacrificing. It's giving it everything. You got to be a pig, man. You can't be a chicken. You got to be a pig. Because if you got to make a good breakfast, the chicken contributed, the chicken sacrificed, but the pig was committed. The pig gave his life to it. If you're in an organization that isn't hitting its metrics, if you're in an organization that you care about, that you believe in, if your church isn't able to raise money, or if your social media page isn't growing, if your business is just falling apart and the culture just isn't there, go be a pig, man. Don't just contribute, commit. That's what I'm talking about. That's being a pig instead of being a chicken. And that's how you fix environmental leadership. You see a problem, you see someone not stepping up to lead, you step in and you take responsibility. And you know what? If you're in the wrong, if you get, don't do that. Hey, I understand. I'm sorry, I overstepped. And then you understand that you need to move your environment and go somewhere else if they're not accepting of new leaders. But normally, when people step up, when they assume responsibility, and they've graduated from self-inflicted failure so that they can be trusted to guide others towards doing the right things when nobody's watching, when those type of people assume leadership, they excel. They always excel. And so that's what we have to aim for. Go be a pig, beat self-inflicted failure so you can be a healthy one, right? And now we're going to discuss the hardest type of failure to accept, right? We're going to talk about when you've done everything right. When you've committed, when you've been the pig, when you've committed beyond all doubt, when you've refined yourself beyond where you thought before, previously you could go, when you've overcome your self-sabotaging habits, when you've overcome your temper, when you've overcome your tendency to isolate, when you've overcome the fear of stepping out and doing something for the greater good, when you're doing all the right things, and when the perfect opportunity arises, or the perfect person comes into your life, or the perfect organization has a spot that might be perfect for you, and you think God spoke on it too, because it feels like an answered prayer, and it might be an answered prayer, and then it doesn't work. That type of failure is called redirect. And that's when God redirects your path to something else. That's when you've proven yourself to the Lord Almighty that you're capable of undertaking something greater than what you wanted or what you felt was your calling or what you felt you could have. He doesn't let you settle. But it doesn't really come in moments when you're feeling like, well, maybe I could go a little higher. It comes when your back is against the wall, dude. That opportunity doesn't come through when you're like 3 days late on rent and your job is in like a hostile merger and you don't know if you're going to have a job next week or the week after that. And you're just lonely and you thought you were supposed to be with this person and they're not around, and you thought you were supposed to have this status by now and it hasn't happened. And more than anything, it isn't about you. It's not about you anymore. You've already graduated from it being about you when we graduated from self-inflicted failure, because we exited selfish habits and selfish ideas. We've become a pig. We've become a contributor, a committed contributor to any cause that we're a part of. And we're finally going to get to have an impact. And you're finally going to be able to make ends meet comfortably. And you're finally just going to be able to rest for a second and reap the harvest of what you've sown. And then it doesn't happen. What do you do? How do you reconcile that? First of all, we're going to face a lot of battles at this moment. At this very moment in time, you're going to, number one, be like, well, why did I refine myself so much? If all of this is for naught, why don't I just go spark up a big old blunt again? Why don't I just go get crazy and act out of pocket at the club or the bar or the house party if you're a psychopath? And why don't I just phone it in? Why don't I just scorch the earth? I did so much for them. Why won't they do something back for me? Why don't I just go burn that bridge? And this is the moment where you're not supposed to burn the bridge, but you're supposed to burn the boats for God. This is the moment where God finally releases to you. He says, oh, you're actually called to something so much bigger than what you think. And he tells you that when you're like at the pit of despair and you have not an ounce of self-belief left in you. And then you get hit with a no on a prayer that you felt like was a sure go from the Lord, and you felt like it was there for you. And then the thing that hurts most is you're like, well, how will I affect positive change this way? It's tough. It's tough. It's a tough question to reconcile with yourself, because what it usually requires you to do is take a step back and view it from 30,000 feet. It requires you to understand that you've become so comfortable with safety that when you're called higher, it feels like a punishment instead of a blessing. And I can't fault us for feeling that way. Like I said, it comes when everything is falling apart and you're supposed to take a shot. You're supposed to trust what you're hearing. Because let's be real, that opportunity that was perfect for you, was it really perfect for you? Or was it perfectly safe for you? Was it perfect for the best version of yourself? Was it perfect for that Spartan inside of you that's a warrior, that wants to affect positive change in the world in such a savage, clandestine way that you're unstoppable? Is that possible from an organizational mindset, or do you have to go build something revolutionary? Are you gonna take the challenge and go build something revolutionary, or are you gonna sit and wallow? You're gonna go build something revolutionary. I've already made the decision for you. So, how do we handle and how do we reconcile the moments between building something incredible that's going to change the world and the absolute pit of despair that we've gotten ourselves caught in, with no way out, with nowhere to turn, with nowhere to run, rent's late, you're lonely, your boys are starting to think that you're a bum because they're like, well, why is he stagnating? Why isn't she doing it? She's so smart. Why hasn't she made the dots connect yet? That's the moment. That's the moment where Job's friends in the Bible, they come to him and they're like, you must have done something real bad if God's doing this to you. You must have really messed up. And they get suspicious of you. How do you handle that moment? And here's the thing. When you got no money, you're supposed to go give whatever you have. You're supposed to take a cheap shot at the devil. You're supposed to take a cheap shot at failure. The concept of failure thinks it has a grip on you. Oh, you're going to take my money? Awesome. I'm going to give this homeless guy the shirt off of my literal back right now because he needs it more than me, because I have an abundance mindset. Wait, I'm not getting it. The job didn't come through for me. I'm going to go write the best letter of recommendation I possibly can for my friend. I'm going to be the best reference I can for this person that I mentor so they get their opportunity. I'm going to be 10 times happier for my friend that got the job that he always wanted instead of jealous. Why? Because that's what leaders do. Life ain't peaches and cream, dude. Especially for the leader. If you've been called to leadership, tough, dude. Trust me, I know. It sucks. It hurts. And most of the time, there is no right decision to make. But the right decision always to make when you're in the pit is you attack. So let's go through it. You don't have money? Give. You're down and out. You don't know how you're going to make rent? Look at the homeless guy outside of Publix. He doesn't know if he's going to get food. What's more important to you? You or others? Can you handle the burden of leadership? Perfect. All right. The organization didn't come through for you. You thought that these people, they're your friends, right? But they just didn't have a spot for you. Do you stop contributing to them? Do you take away your philanthropic work for them like it's a prize to be had? Do you act transactionally, or do you go and you give more? Because clearly they need you to give more. When that person who you love more than anything leaves you, do you go and try and just date a million people or hop into something with someone else that you shouldn't just to get over somebody? Or do you go within and look at everything within you that might be flawed? Because yeah, dude, we all have flaws. I'm not going to sugarcoat nothing for you. Everyone's got flaws. I've got a ton of character flaws. I had a temper problem for most of my life. I had a hedonism problem for most of my life. I had a laziness problem for most of my life. I had a selfishness issue for most of my life that I'm still looking to work through today. I had a problem with wanting to be the wrath of God for people that wronged me or people I love. Is that the way to do things? No. Someone hurts your feelings? Bless them. No, don't just give them $5, dude. Your coworker, you don't think that they're a good person? Why don't you pour into them and see where their pain comes from and try and help them heal that? You might gain a brother for life. This is the aspect. This is the part of becoming a true leader. If you've been called to really be a leader, if you feel like you want to change the world, how are you going to handle world-changing initiatives if you can't have your own life shaken up every once in a while? If you want to have a family and you want to field the well-being emotionally, financially, physically, health-wise for your future wife and kids, how are you going to handle disappointment when it's just you? Yeah, man, your back's up against the wall. You might not make rent. You're not making enough money right now. You're feeling stressed. But it's just you, dude. Take a chance. Broaden your shoulders. Get ready to shoulder that weight for the people you love. Because you know what? Maybe you don't have your own family yet, but maybe your parents need you more than you think. Maybe your aunts or uncles or grandparents need you more than you think. Maybe your boss needs you to step up and cover some bases for him. Maybe if there's no room for an advance at your company and corporate's really breathing down you and your team's neck, maybe instead of venting to your boss for the umpteenth time about how stupid all these new rules that you have to follow are, go ask your boss how he's doing. Go ask if his family's doing all right. Go ask how he's handling the stress of things. Because he's always watched out for you. And this is me talking to myself right now. Right? This is the thing. It's like maybe number one, God didn't come through because he's got something better for you. But on the path to that better thing, to be someone who's worthy of stewarding greatness, you have to embody greatness in the pit. When Joseph spent 13 years in the pit, he had to embody greatness to get out. There was no other way. When Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego were in the Babylonian system, they had to remain faithful. They had to exceed past every expectation. They had to hold themselves more upright. Yeah, everything went wrong for you. Do you go crash out? Do you go to the bar? Or do you take a run and start pouring into others? Your prayers aren't getting answered. Fine. Do you go and pray for your friends? Or are you so focused on your prayers that aren't answered? This is the part. This is the part that you really need to think about. Were you shrinking yourself to be made safe when you're supposed to become the canopy that others can go to for safety? Were you looking for shelter when you were supposed to build it for the rest of your tribe? Because sometimes that opportunity doesn't come through because you're supposed to go build a better shelter. When you feel like it's just not happening for me. No one's recognizing my work. Have you really covered all your bases? And you know what? Maybe your work is getting recognized. But maybe people know that you would be stifled so fast with the rate that you're growing at. At the rate that you're growing, maybe you need to take a chance and bet on yourself. Because, dude, I can't lie to you guys. Like, sometimes, dude, like, just the worst thing can happen. Sometimes you're going to get a diagnosis that just crushes you. Sometimes you're going to get some news that just makes you feel like just laying down and curling up in a ball and hiding under your desk until the end of the day at work. Who are you in those moments? What kind of man are you in those moments? You know, I like to use a sports anecdote for this. Is when conditioning, it's when coach does the 4 quarters of conditioning, we're going to do like we 10 100-yard sprints for each quarter. So you get through your 400 yards worth of sprints in the fourth quarter, you finish strong, you're like, yeah, and then coach, every time, overtime. What kind of man are you when coach calls out overtime? What kind of woman are you when coach calls out overtime? Are you the one that's just trying to stay in the middle of the pack, maybe the back middle of the pack, and just get through conditioning? Or are you striving in those moments where you have nothing left in the tank? When you've got $10 left in your bank account and you've got the option to buy yourself a full lunch or buy yourself a snack and the homeless guy out front a snack, what decision are you making? Because God, or if you believe in the universe, whatever that means, would God or the universe bless you with money if you're not one to share, if you're not living in an abundance mindset? No. Will God bless you with people when you're more concerned about what you can get from people than what you can give people? No. Will God give you an opportunity that will stifle your true impact in this world because it will make you feel safe and comfortable? No. So this final step is hard. You have to truly step out of safety and into calling. But the fun part about this is that all the failures that lead up to this point are actually training and development on how to properly fail, learn, and succeed in this phase. In this third phase, You have a choice to make. Is all the failure that I've had and all the times I've been screwed over and all the times I've had my trust broken, is that evidence for why it's not going to work out for you? Or are you taking that as lessons on how to build properly? It is in your hands at that point in time. Now that it's in your hands and he didn't come through for you, that's the final test, brother. That's the final test, sister. Who are you when all the lights are off? When all the money's gone? When all the people have turned? What are you doing? Are you finding a way to make every possible impact you can? Because the only way that you're going to have true influence is if you're someone that can maximize that influence. Bad people can maximize influence really well because they don't have to play by the rules. They can just go crazy and influence stuff. So if you want to make the world a better place, you're going to face resistance. It would be easy to turn into a bad guy and take advantage of people and create a predatory business. Yeah. But isn't it a worthy, noble struggle to do it the right way? Isn't it a worthy, noble struggle to keep your head about you, to stay calm? That's what it's all about. So I hope this helped, because the way that you become the true leader is that you create positivity. Become the creator of positivity in your community. Channel that energy from the Most High. Contribute. Commit. Be the pig, not the chicken. When you're having your worst day, you've got to look for someone to pour into. When you're at your most depressed, one of your friends needs you. Because now you're in a state where you can empathize, harmonize, and speak life into somebody. The paradigm of positivity is no matter what happens to you, you generate positivity. You don't look for positivity, you make it. You be it. You embody it. You do the work for others. That's what being a leader is. When nothing works for you, when you're at the bottom of the totem pole, are you the one clapping it up, keeping people going? The best lacrosse teams I were ever on were the teams where the last guy on the bench was just as committed as the first guy on the score sheet. Those were the successful teams. The true leaders were the guys on the back of the bench. And you know what? Eventually, they made their way onto the field and they scored their goals too when they got bigger, when they got older, when they got more experience. But they became a leader at the back of the bench. So you just got sent to the back of the bench, shorty. You leveled up. You're on the new team. And dang, you realize it's levels to this. You're on the back of the bench. Are you going to become a leader right now or no? Because before you can lead from the front, you have to serve from the back. You have to become the king of the bottom to truly be the king of the top, because the benevolent king concerns himself with all, the bottom, the top, the middle. Create the positivity in your situation. Love you all.